Covers a lot of different aspects to the whole sort of post-production process. And I often like to think of editing in terms of left brain or right brain considerations because right brain is very analytical. Right brain thinking, they say, is very analytical, while left brain thinking, they say, is very creative and artistic. And with editing, you really sort of have to walk in both worlds because there are quite a few and a lot of technical considerations that need to be taken into account in order to properly deliver it and deliver minimum quality along those lines. But then there's also a lot of artistic choices that you make to tell your story and to get your idea across in the most elegant way possible. And you're always sort of riding those two, you're sort of just jumping back and forth between those two fences. And so we're going to talk a lot about both. I'm going to start the discussion on editing with much of the technical parts of this. And this is like the really technical parts of it in terms of what you're recording on or what medium you record it on, and things to be thinking about as you're going forwards. Then once we get those covered, they'll pretty much be the first two lectures, and then we'll get into more of a bit more of the art. Then we'll sort of see how the two sides play with each other. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started with editing. All right. Now, this is sort of the nitty gritty part of it. The life cycle of an edit is called post production. In this process, you will acquire footage, you will review and then organize your footage, you'll do an assemble edit, you'll do a rough cut, a fine cut, go into sound design, color correction, and then your final delivery. But what does this mean? Let's start with the first one, acquiring the media. This means that you get your media. You get you what you need to edit. Footage could be the original footage, stock footage, still, sound effects, music, whatever. Depending on how well organized or well funded the production is, this may not necessarily be that easy. Acquiring footage is that acquiring. Sometimes you'll run into situations where you don't have the footage that you need and it was not shot, or the director forgot to get a shot, or a scene had to be scrapped, and you have to deal with what's left, or find a way around it. So acquiring is not as simple as it sounds necessarily. Review and organize. In this one, you have to understand what kind of footage you have to begin with. So when you're reviewing and organizing, you need to look at your frame rate, and we'll talk a lot about that here in a minute. You have to say, is it progressive or is it interlaced? What's the raster size? What is the format? And we are going to sort of take a sideline here on the rest of the organization process, looking at these things. So before you can even start looking at it and cataloging it and organizing it, you need to know these things. Frame rate. Okay, frame rate, what it's about is the moving image that we see on TV or in a movie theater is just an illusion. There is no such thing as an actual moving image. We are actually watching many, many, many still images called frames that pop on the screen very rapidly, creating the illusion of movement. So ever done, this is just like, a flip book. Have you ever done a flip book where you take, like, 10 or 15 pages, a piece of paper, and you put maybe a ball, draw a circle on one side, and then each piece of paper you draw a circle a little bit farther across that page, and you flip all the pages, it looks like the balls are rolling across a piece of paper. That's the same exact principle that all television and movie film runs on. The number of frames per second that pop up on the screen is called your frame rate. There are many kinds of frame rates. The most common are 24p, which is in cinema, movie theaters. There's 30p, which is a little bit more common on TV. There's 30i, which is the norm for standard definition video. 60p, which people shoot on if they want to. More often on the lower end cameras, people shoot at 60 frames per second if they want to do slow motion, because it can help, because it's very easy to double that frame rate and get a slow motion. And then there's 60i. 60i right now is the current norm for high definition video on most broadcast channels, especially not national ones. All right. Now you saw there was a 24p and a 30i and a 30p. Those stand for progressive and interlaced. All right. These are two terms that you might want to remember: progressive and interlaced. Now, unlike film, in which the whole image is projected on the screen at once, like this is a movie theater film, video is composed of lines or pixel rows displayed across a screen. And it starts at the top of the screen and starts moving down to the bottom. You can see the lines going down this image. The lines or pixel rows, which is another term for them, can be displayed in two ways. The first way is to split the lines into two fields, and they are called fields, in which all of the odd number lines, or pixel rows, depending on how you want to call them, will be displayed first, and then all of the even numbered lines or pixel rows will be displayed next. In essence, they're producing a complete frame. This is called interlacing. So what they're doing is they're putting every other line of the image on first, and then they're putting the other lines in right behind them. Repeat this even odd interlace sequence frequently enough, say 25 or 30 times per second, and you'll get what's called persistence of human vision, which allows viewers to see what appears to be complete moving images. Now, persistence of human vision that I have here, that is just what our brain does. The reason why we see a moving image, even though we don't see a collection of still images, is just easier for our brain to process and say, no, this is real life moving in front of us. The main benefit of interlaced video is that it allows more detailed images to be created than would otherwise be possible with a given amount of bandwidth. Essentially what that means, what I'm talking about with that, is that on an internet connection, you can only send so many megabits of data per second over that line. HD video takes up a lot of bandwidth. High definition video takes up a whole lot of bandwidth. It's a very large signal, sometimes going through a very narrow pipe, if you want to use that analogy. And by interlacing, by cutting the image, essentially you're cutting the image in half. You're able to send just one half of the image, and then send the other half of the image. Now, it's not top and bottom like we talked about, it's every other line, but essentially the concept is the same. You're sending half the image across that pipeline at the same time, and so you're cutting the amount of bandwidth, the amount of data that you need to send through those channels at any one point in half when you interlace. And so this is used quite often. The reason why television uses it quite often, so that will save on the amount of data they need to stream. That way they can go through and they can put surround sound channels for audio. They can also send through other supplemental information on those same channels for people to take a look at. So that's why currently interlaced is used quite a bit. Now, interlaced video comes with some real-world downside, including image softening that occurs during fast motion sequences, as well as what's called Miale or strobing artifacts that appear sometimes. If you look here on the left, this image here on the left, this is an interlaced video. This is, and you'll see the banding here. If you look at the edges on this truck, that banding there is what's happening, because the problem that you run into with interlaced video, you have really fast motion. This doesn't always happen, but it can happen, is that when you're filming interlaced, because when you film interlaced as well as show an interlaced, when you film interlaced, those first bands capture that moving image, and then when the second bands, the second field, because they are called fields, when the second field goes to scan the image, or goes to get the image, the truck has moved forward just a little bit. And so those even and odd fields are no longer lined up like a perfect puzzle piece. They get skewed a little bit. And that's when you can get that what's called banding or strobing happening, which is not a good thing. Progressive video, on the other hand, is made up of consecutively displayed video frames that contain all the horizontal lines and make up the image shown below. So when you shoot progressive, you are getting the entire frame all at one time. So progressive is nice, comes in handy in that you're seeing the entire frame all at one time. That's the biggest difference between the two. All right, that's all I got for now. So that's interlaced and progressive for now.